Hey, Skiff listeners, hear about the latest trends in the travel industry with the Brand USA Talks Travel podcast. Right now, listen to special live from IPW interviews featuring U.S. Travel's Jeff Freeman.
DMOs are at the heartbeat of U.S. travel.
Liz Bittner from Travel South.
A lot of key gateway markets are back.
LA Tourism's Adam Burke.
We all win when we all partner together.
Plus, Brand USA's Stacey Melman and Jackie Ennis with international travel trends and Chris Thompson's farewell finale. I'm Mark Lapidus. Join us for Brand USA Talks Travel on your favorite podcast platform.
Brand USA Talks Travel.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. I'm Sarah Kopit, Skiff's editor-in-chief with Seth Borko, Skiff's head of research. We are here with the Weekly Travel Podcast. It has been a back-to-back couple of days for the two of us. Seth, we are tired.
We are very tired, Sarah. We are exhausted, in fact.
So we had two big events for Skift in these last couple of days. We had our Data and AI Summit and a short-term rental summit. They both were great. And Seth and I are here today to talk about what happened, what we heard, what we learned, and to kind of dissect it. Seth, what were your big highlights? What made you the most excited?
So there was a lot. I mean, let's start with short-term rental summit. We have got two summits, so why don't we start with that? Short-term rental is a sector that myself and my team and Skips in general have been following for a very long time. I was really excited. It seemed like a much more maybe realistic conference than in times past. Like some of the shine has come off, but that's also a good thing. I felt the people in the room and in the audience were far more serious, far more mature about the future of the sector. And far more focused on profitability, which is a great thing. There was a lot of great sessions. I'll pick one that I moderated. We had this great session with Evolve Vacation Rentals. That's Brian Egan and Portoro, Dustin and Portoro, the both branded professional property managers. So these are the boots on the grounds folks. And to me, a really, really interesting debate in the sector has been like, can you build a property management brand? All of the branding seems to go through Vrbo. All of the branding seems to go through Airbnb. Can you build a brand like Evolve, like Vacasa, like Sonder? Some of them have struggled. And the hard part has been getting homeowners and building that consumer presence. And I asked Brian Egan, Evolve is a top 5 property manager in the world. I asked him about this. And he had some and Dustin, but they both had some really great answers. He really focused on the homeowner. This was a big focus of debate of how do you attract homeowners? Because homeowners have been such key to growth. I think that's one of the things that was overlooked in past iterations of the short-term rental conference.
One thing that I mentioned, I agreed with Carl on something. One thing I disagree with him on is that these companies can't scale above 25,000. I think the key, I heard the line. I wasn't in the session, but I heard the line.
The thing that I think we all have to look at is historically, Dennis, I can't think of any property manager who has been able to continue growing after about 25,000 properties. I just haven't seen it.
But the key here, and I say that kiddingly, the key is you can't think about 35,000. If n equals 35,000 in your operation, you're lost. It has to be n equals 1. That's how the owner is thinking about it. It has to be the fact that this is the second largest asset in their life. It is largely likely the second largest expense structure in their life. And that is a tremendous amount of responsibility as a partner to make sure that they have the rental income necessary to cover those bills.
One of the things that struck me pretty much across the board with all of the guests that came on to speak was they talked about the individual homeowner quite a bit.
Yes.
There was a real focus on who these people are, what they want, what they need, as opposed to kind of, to your point about, bringing it down to earth and their reality. I think maybe we've gotten past the point where we've proven that, this is a business that can work. Like, yes, we have. Like, how long has Airbnb been around for? Like almost 20 years, right? And so, yes, it works. Yes, it can make money. Yes, it can do all of these things. But at the end of the day, you still need human beings with this like massive asset to kind of turn it over in a certain way to you as a company. And there's a lot of trust there. And so how are these companies doing that? How are they, communicating with, leveraging, making a profit from and on and together with these homeowners? So that was really interesting to me. I really wasn't expecting to hear that as much as I did.
And if I can, I'm sure I'll upset some STR people by saying this. It feels to me like part of what's happened was you had a bunch of people come into the space and be like, oh, this is an interesting product, an interesting market. The way to grow it is we need to get people to use it. People don't know enough about it. Airbnb is still kind of niche. Let's build this whole consumer thing. And it was all about being consumer friendly. This is old history now, but there was a long time when you couldn't book instantly on HomeAway. When Expedia bought HomeAway, you had to do everything over like requests and stuff. Like Expedia took a lot of time to do instant booking on HomeAway. So it's all about what's good for the consumer, How do we make it as seamless as possible for the consumer? And then we've heard on earnings calls, Vacasa, which is one of the largest, they're struggling with homeowner churn. And so maybe the pendulum swung too far in the direction of the traveler. And I was like, wait a second, this is an ecosystem. There's multiple parts and pieces of this. Maybe we need to swing a little bit back towards the homeowner. I think that's I would agree with you, Sarah. That's a theme that I heard throughout this conference. What sessions did you like? What was your favorite?
Yeah, so I think my favorite one, the one that I just simply enjoyed listening to most it was our second to last set of speakers of the day, and it was the panel about the impact that New York's short-term rental regulation has had on these homeowners. And basically, we've talked about it a lot here at Skift about how, the New York City law has essentially banned short-term rentals. You can't do it. I mean, there are some loopholes, but essentially it's 30 days or more. And so just listening to some advocacy groups and, listening to them talk about what the impact of these laws have been, like very personally on, Jose from Queens and, John from Bay Ridge, because that is what happened. Right. Yeah. And I think that, again, back to the individual and the homeowner, that's really like the crux of the short-term rental game. Without these homes, you have no business.
I'll tell you, I spent 15 years saving to buy my house.
Right.
One of our co-founders of Roar grew up in Section 8 housing,
right,
and moved to New York and was able to save finally. And through the luck of timing and thank God I was able to save the money, etc. We have a home, and our goal is not God bless the people who want to build tech stacks. I have a healthy respect for it. But there's room in this market for people who just want to use the home they live in, leverage the asset that they have in order to make sure they can take care of their family and take care of themselves. And you as people who are doing this work, you can play a role in advocating with us for what ultimately is the supply that your business depends on. It doesn't service anyone if everyone wins except for the individual homeowners.
Right.
And in New York City, in our case, we feel like 1 and 2 family homeowners, we're losing this battle. And in some cases, people are losing their homes. And, we just need help advocating for that nuance, that carve out.
So yeah, I absolutely love that clip. I think, Sarah, we were both discussing this a little bit in pre-production, how that single line stood out to us in the short-term rental as like one of the most powerful lines of the night. So absolutely in the homeowner category. But there's it's not just New York, there's a much broader conversation to be had about regulation. And I think you were moderating that panel, right, Sarah?
Yeah, so I talked to the mayor of Columbia, South Carolina, and we were talking a little bit about how regulation has basically fanned out throughout the United States, and I suppose the world. We were most concentrating on the good old United States of America. But the interesting thing for me about that was that, it's so ununiform. Like there are as many different ways to regulate short-term rentals as there are cities. Like there's probably 50 different ways that they've done it. And so there is no consistency. there is very little, like you talk about the homeowner, right?
Yep.
Like if you are going to buy and start, like let's say you're going to go buy a second home and you think to yourself, well, we'll go up and we'll use it for a couple months a year, and then the rest of the time I'll Airbnb it. Unless you have like some settled law where you are, there's like it's like the wild wild west. Like you won't necessarily know if in a year you're still going to be able to operate that business. Like that's how varied because it's done city by city, town by town, county by county, and some places let it in altogether. Some people like New York say no. Some people say if you did it for a while when we passed the law, we'll grandfather you in. Some people say you just have to register, you have to pay a certain amount of taxes. Some have it as a percent of the available like housing. Like it's just it's.
And what's even scarier is it can like change midway through. Like imagine if there's a law on the books and you buy, I'm fine. And then you invest hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, and take out a debt loan and a debt to do it. And then new city council or new town council comes in and whoops, sorry about that. It's a huge challenge. And I think, it's interesting, the final session of the night was Jay Carney. I keep saying of the night, of the day. The final session of the day was Jay Carney. And it was fascinating because he got asked the question, is there something to do on the federal level about short-term rental regulations? And he was Obama's press secretary. He worked for Amazon. He's used to working at the federal level. And we can talk about it. His answer was no.
We do engage with federal lawmakers, on state-specific issues. Sometimes there are state regulations, statewide, so maybe governors, state houses, but sometimes senators. There are certain things we have in front of the federal government, but really not much. It's one of the things that's been a learning for me in this role is unlike my past roles, both at Amazon and government, and even as a journalist, which were very nationally focused and even internationally. Like this is all local, like it's city by city. Around the town by town, around the world.
There's no one at the federal level to go to. It's, in many cases, not even at the state level. They're playing whack-a-mole with cities, counties.
City council. Countries. City council is generally, I worked on a piece for Skift about a month ago about neighbors in short-term rentals, like neighborhoods and how they were, some places were regulating, it's a lot of these noise complaints, parking complaints, garbage complaints. Like this is the type of minutia that's driving the regulation. But of course, if you're the neighbor or if you're the person down the street listening to the loud party or have somebody parking in your parking space or the trash piled up, it's not minutia to you, right? It's just that's a big deal for you as well. So city council, that's where all the action is. A lot of spicy city council meetings. When
all politics is local, right? That's how the saying goes. I have a very New York City story of one of my first apartments when I moved to the city was being run partially as a landlord and partially as an illegal hotel, as an Airbnb. And that was like, that was like my start in the city. Like, what is going on? So it definitely happens.
That's like, it's so funny. That's such a New York City story, right? It's just very typical. But we talked a little bit about New York City as well, and about how what New York City did with their short-term rental regulation essentially just drove it into the black market, which New Yorkers love a good black market. It's not like we don't know how to navigate that. We have a clip where the mayor talked about that too.
New York create regulations that can be achieved and achieve those local goals. I think they can, and they can do it for a reasonable level, like some other communities did, like North Myrtle Beach or Glenn County.
You have any thoughts on New York? I love talking about this in New York because it's my backyard.
It's funny. My oldest daughter lives here, and we kind of laugh about the black market here in New York, especially because you look at when they went to regulate marijuana shops. There are more illegal marijuana shops than there are legal, and they can't keep up with. I think it's going to be the same thing. It's just driving it under, and it's going to exist. So why not sit down with folks and figure out a way to make this work?
All right, so you heard it there. When my uncle comes to visit, I'm sending him a Craigslist link, and that's how he's going to afford to stay in New York City. I mean, there's a lot of challenges, right? We've talked about a lot of challenges with this sector. We've talked about building property management, about the importance of homeowners, about building those brands in the space. The one thing we haven't really touched on was the big platforms themselves, the Airbnbs, Expedias, and Booking.coms of the world. I had a chance to speak with Booking.com, with Eric Bergaglia, their VP of homes and growth. And I said, look, are consumers tired of short-term rentals? And well, the good news that he gave us was no. And we also have a clip of that one. I like this clip.
Are you still seeing consumer interest in the short-term rental sector?
Yes, definitely. I think one example of this from the Booking.com lens is 5-6 years ago, it was about 25% of the total company room nights. In Q1, it's 36%.
36%.
So every quarter, it keeps growing globally, and in every region, it keeps growing as well. So we are seeing more of our Booking.com customers starting to book vacation rentals with us. And that's good. So I think there's a lot of definitely no fatigue.
No fatigue. Yes. We're still seeing growth. Everyone in this room is very happy to hear that from a very big player too.
So no consumer fatigue, continued growth. Maybe it's bad news for Airbnb because it means more competition, but it's certainly good news for the sector. And so I'm excited to see what comes next. We'll take a break right here, and when we get back into it, we'll discuss our other summit of this very busy week. We'll talk about data and AI in the travel industry.
Hey, CF listeners, hear about the latest trends in the travel industry with the Brand USA Talks Travel podcast. Right now, listen to special live from IPW interviews featuring U.S. Travel's Jeff Freeman.
DMOs are at the heartbeat of U.S. travel.
Liz Bittner from Travel South.
A lot of key gateway markets are back.
LA Tourism's Adam Burke.
We all win when we all partner together.
Plus, Brand USA's Stacey Melman and Jackie Ennis with international travel trends and Chris Thompson's farewell finale. I'm Mark Lapidus. Join us for Brand USA Talks Travel on your favorite podcast platform.
Brand USA Talks Travel.
Welcome back, everybody. Next, we are going to talk about the other event Skift had this week. It's the Skift Data and AI Summit, where we talked about the future. We talked about what has been in the last couple of years, and even more so, what is coming. And it was really fascinating, to kind of juxtapose the 2 days where we were talking about how for short-term rentals, which was kind of like the bright, shiny new kid on the block for a while, they're the mature people now. They're like the young adults. The new kid now is data. Data's been around for a while, but it's really AI and how data feeds the AI machine. So, same question, Seth. What was your big takeaway, and what was your favorite conversation?
Well, I know that Rafit and many of us, we were very intentional with the data and AI. It wasn't just an AI summit, it was a data and AI, because exactly what you said, the data is what feeds the AI. And one of the big themes that came through to me was good data equals good AI, and how hard it is to get good data. Internally, with a single business, it's hard for them to get good data, let alone to get good data from peers in the same industry, let alone to get good data from other industries or other parts of the travel industry. That was a big learn for me, and that was a lot of talk about it. I was also, I will admit, I was surprised to see and excited to see how far in advance some of these projects had gotten. I admittedly was kind of expecting some like loosey-goosey, vague things. Oh yeah, we're really excited about it. People came with really incredible projects, concrete, tangible. Here's what we have have built and are launching with AI, which was super, super exciting to me. We saw things around airlines, around waste management, around travel agents and booking. Lots of very, very cool case studies. Was there anything exciting to you, Sarah?
Yeah, so I talked to the CIO of United Airlines, and he's been doing this for a while, and he said United is probably farther along than most airlines in this space. But I think my favorite part of our conversation, it was really the part that kind of we all can imagine in our heads. It was when he was talking about how they use AI to decide when they hold the planes for connections. And they do. So they have, a model built around, you take all, who's on the plane, how long it takes for them to get, to their next gate, where the plane is going, if it's even there, all of these different factors.
We have a product and we call it Connection Saver. And, the insight we started with was that customers were saying, I'm walking up to the plane, I'm rushing, I'm connecting, and the door gets shut. And they sit there and they're like, well, can you open the door? And the gauge is like, well, we can't open the door. But then the plane sits there. It sits there for 5 or 10 minutes, and it's a very terrible customer experience. And so that was the start of what we now call it Connection Saver, which is a lot of algorithms and some AI that basically looks at all the passengers that are coming in. It then calculates, based on when we think they're going to arrive, how long it's going to take to walk to their gate. Then we figure out how much time do we have for that, how much slack is in the schedule of the plane that's departing, along with who's connecting on the plane. Like the last thing we want to do is have a customer go hold the plane for one person and make 5 people miss their flight. So we've built this algorithm called Connection Saver, and so that it's been very successful. 2 things we've added to it that are really exciting. One, we started communicating to the customers. We had a lot of debate, like should you tell people that you're holding the plane? Like would that make it worse or better? And so we let people know that we're trying to get you to the plane, so they don't stop at Starbucks or they don't, they move along. But the other one that's been really interesting is we actually let the passengers know on the plane that why we're holding. And I don't know if anyone's experienced this, but it's an amazing sort of moment of sort of humans coming together, because everyone who gets the text usually knows what this is about. And when the customers finally get on and they're sort of disheveled and discombobulated and breathing hard, and then the whole plane cheers, everyone claps, and it's a really
I would
great
probably
moment.
Burst out into tears,
right.
because
they're like, you made it, and so it's a really great moment.
I was just thinking, oh my God, if I had been running through the airport, with my kids and my luggage, trying to get somewhere I really needed to be, and I walked onto that plane and everybody cheered, I'd probably burst into tears. It would just be too much. It would be too much for me. So, it was kind of nice how much a lot of our guests and our speakers really brought. I mean, it is the hospitality industry. It is travel. So I guess maybe it shouldn't be that surprising. They really brought this is the AI. This is the really technical and computer sciencey based stuff. And this is how it affects human beings. I would say that was one of the things that I really noticed, is that, people were really good. Our speakers were really good about linking back to that and never forgetting why we're doing all of this in the first place.
I thought that was an amazing example too, because that's one of those great scenarios where you would think intuitively that if your flight is late, that's going to hurt United's reputation. So if I'm a customer on a United flight, and my flight is 10 minutes delayed, that's a ding against United. But when they say, actually, you were 10 minutes delayed because we were trying to help a passenger, that's a technology makes that connection, but it's a very human connection. And I suspect, people love that stuff, right? Oh my God, United held a plane. Even if you're a little bit late, United held a plane for someone. That's so cool. So that's an amazing aha moment. If I can give an example, and this is a little, you got to cut me some slack, a little nerdy or a little more operational, but we heard 2 sides, right? One is the surprise and delight guest moments. The other was there's a real impact that AI can have on business operations, which is admittedly the less sexy part of it, but also just as important. And we had I had a panel with Amex GBT, and they've got these amazing travel agents. And admittedly, they've had, a lot of turnover, since the pandemic. Some of them are new on the job. Even the ones that have been on the job for a while, it can be very confusing. I don't know if you've ever tried to read the fare codes, the actual fare basis terms and conditions for a bit of fare codes. But it turns out it's not just the little button. You're book flight, go. The flight will take you from Newark to London. That's not how it works. It's pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of conditions.
What you're seeing here is a global distribution system display of a fair rule. I chose KLM because he's next to me, and I took Amsterdam, New York because that's what he flew. And I said, if you were to speak to an agent and ask them, can I cancel this later if my trip doesn't happen? Or what are the limitations of this fare? They will be doing this. They are actually doing move down, move down, move down. There are 19 pages of this. And it's not a KLM thing. This is every airline out there has fare rules attached to their fares, and they are super long, unstructured. There's no standard to them. They're usually in English. So if you're a non-English speaking agent, if you're on the phone in a high pressure situation, it's crazy to expect you to read this and then come up with a synopsis of what the answer is. But if you take this as it is, just take the display, do nothing to it, give it to an LLM, and say, summarize it for me, it does it really well. The prompt doesn't even need to be complicated. You just say, summarize it for me, make it into functional categories. How much vaguer could I have been? And you say, okay, go, do it. This is what you get. And it contains every, I would say, significant item that is on that very long display. And from there, if you keep the context of the conversation, you can actually have a conversation and say, tell me, if you go to the next slide, tell me, can I cancel this ticket? And it will tell you exactly and give you the reference of where it found it. And this is not using any kind of bleeding edge, training of the AI model, nothing. It's literally take the text, dump it, say, I'm going to ask you questions about this, and then go for it.
What Marilyn was saying is that they're using generative AI to effectively to translate. So you can translate from Spanish to English. You can also translate from travel agentese, from airlineese into travel agentese, so to speak, into consumerese, using AI, artificial intelligence. And that's really cool use case as well. And again, they stood that project up very quickly and launched it, and it's being used by their agents today. So incredible to see where these use cases are making real on the ground practical impacts.
So before we get too excited about, everything that may happen or is happening, one of the other panels that I thought was great with Gilad and Shane was about not getting too wrapped up in the hype. We have AI of today is, the crypto of yesterday, and I don't know what was before crypto, but
there was no history before crypto. It was the
nothing.
world's
There was
before
nothing
crypto, after crypto, right?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. And so, they just talked really kind of simply and plainly about some of the limitations to this, and really remembering what AI actually is and what it isn't.
Yes. And what it is a tool, right? It's a tool to be used.
Yeah.
It's something that we've heard a couple of times people say about how, Microsoft Excel didn't put, some people did probably lose manual data entry jobs, but it's not like we no longer crunch numbers because we have Excel. We're actually more people than ever before crunch numbers. It's not like these things have come before. They're tools that will be used. And he was making the point, actually, as we go, like kind of what you're saying, like what came before crypto. Gilad was comparing back to the mobile revolution.
So to me, it seems that to say that we have revolutionized the way we do trip planning or things in our industry is kind of a silly thing to say. You wouldn't say that if you got a brand new hammer in your shop and it was like just a better hammer than the one you had before. What the revolution will be, and this I think ties back to what Shane's point made, is as we learn to use these new tools over a period of time. So the advice I often have for leaders of both startups and big companies, I say, the people who won the mobile revolution were not the first companies with a mobile app. Right. It was the companies who committed to a decade of testing and learning and iterating as they learned how to use this new set of tools in mobile technology. And AI will be the same. So have we revolutionized anything yet? I think the answer is clearly no. Yeah. 10 years from now, might we look back and say we revolutionized it? I hope so, but I think it's too early to tell.
It's not necessarily that mobile phones changed everything. It didn't fundamentally change how you take a trip, but it does change a lot about how you book trips and do this. And the winners weren't necessarily the first movers, because mobile technology was still experimental. It wasn't in its final form yet. There's all sorts of upgrades to bandwidth, things that had to come. And his point was that it was the people who really iterated on mobile technology, month in, month out, year in, year out, who really built these amazing app and mobile ecosystems that are paying dividends today. It's not necessarily the very first Flappy Bird app, which is not even that early, but like, it wasn't those sort of apps that necessarily had the staying power and that transformed businesses, right? So sticking with this session, which again, I really enjoyed. Galad's a great person to listen to talk. He had this one other line. So I'm paraphrasing Galad. He was paraphrasing someone else. So it's a double paraphrase, but the line was something along the lines of...
I like the Bill Gates line of, I think we're all overestimating what we can accomplish in a year and underestimating what we can accomplish in a decade. So I think that is probably the right answer here.
I think that's a great kind of closing point to think about as we wrap up this conversation. There's a huge amount happening. People are making real practical progress on the operational side, on the guest-centric side. There's a lot happening, but we also, on the one hand, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourselves. On the other hand, you want to sort of start thinking about what the big picture implications of the technology will be, in the year Skiff Podcast 2034, what we will be discussing. And so that was.
Yeah. Do you remember, I know you said we're going to wrap up, but do you remember the first time you went on the internet?
Do I remember the first time I went on the internet? I do. Yeah.
I do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was yours?
It was my parents in the living room, right? Because we didn't have laptops, personal computers. I went to my parents' living room, and I was probably younger than you were when you first used the internet. I was browsing dinosaurs, different types of dinosaurs that I could access on the internet. That was what young Seth really cared a lot about. I'm not a paleontologist, unfortunately. What was your first moment on the internet?
So I was in college, and it was 1994, and I was a freshman in college, and Friends had just started, the comedy. It had just launched, and I remember like going down to the computer lab, because of course no laptops, no personal computers at that point, going down to the computer lab, and they had been putting the big long string, the URL, like not NBC.com. It was http:// whatever. And I remember like typing it all in, into the browser, and like it brought up the NBC page, and I saw Jennifer Aniston and company there. I was like, so this is it. Like, this is the big thing. And then I closed it and left. And like, so I always think about that, about like the unforeseen, like, I couldn't even comprehend about like clicking through like multiple pages at that point, and and what just how over the next 30 years that it would change all of our lives. So I think that is probably with AI we're looking at that on a multiple.
We're looking at the Jennifer Aniston Friends landing page of AI, and the fact that there's pretty impressive already. What the future will hold is incredible.
All right. If any of you have any questions for Seth or myself, please drop us an email. We have a new email address now, podcasts, plural, @skiff.com. So send us any questions, any feedback. We love to hear from you. Well, that's where we're going to end it today. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next week.
We're both going to get some well-deserved rest.
Yes.
All right. I'll see you guys.